we're organizing this panel, and while we're doing that, let me just take a few moments to say, first of all, how delighted I am to be here, and I wanted to give Costas, Camille, and Julie a round of applause for a fabulous meeting. I want to say that Costas in particular is taking a new visionary look at CITRIS and has made some special connections with the other 3 institutes, and so a new pathway forward with Larry here and Costas in the room, and this new NSF grant they have is going to be a very special path forward. So Costas, thank you for this next big wave of innovation. Another thing I'd like to do when I have the moment, and we're still miking people up, is that we saw a lot of wonderful things from our faculty today, but I think you realize as you look at this fabulous building that it's the staff and the students that really make a huge impact. And as I look around this room, I see Bill Flounders in front of us, the director of the Marvell Nano Lab. Bill, thank you for being here and all the work you do there. I see I was the director when we moved in this building. So I worked side by side with Domenico Kawanaga, who's there to make this building happen. I want to make him have a applause. Somebody who didn't get applause yet is Melissa Nidover, who worked with Dado Bonato and the Bonato family to make this happen. Just to the right of them at the back is Pat, and from both Merced and from UC Santa Cruz. We've got our colleagues here from that area. Sorry, guys, I'm making this up as I go along, so I'm stumbling on my words a little bit. Laurie Mariano and Yvette Subramaniam, Michelle, some of the people here in this room have been working on CITRIS for more than 15 years, right? And I think we owe them an enormous vote of thanks for plugging away every day and making this beautiful building resonate with this industry and resonate with this research. And finally, I just want to say thank you to all of the staff and all of the students for doing that. That's wonderful. So I think we have our wonderful panel in place, and I think really the work that Governor Davis has done to spur these innovation institutes is just fabulous. And I'm going to give him some more ad-lib time now to focus on something that he described at lunchtime. I had a terrific lunch with him and some colleagues about the future. He has some great ideas about how private enterprise and the state together can look ahead at some of the major challenges we now face with the drought and with the water situation, how that connects into intelligent infrastructure, sustainable infrastructures. And I think as a community, with guidance from colleagues like Governor Davis, we can work with the state to address those really big impact things for Californians going forward. And so may I hand over to you? That's sort of half a question and half a visionary statement. And I think you've got some good ideas in this area. So.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you for mentioning partners from Santa Cruz, Davis and Merced. I neglected to do that. But they're all partners, they're all contributing, and they're all advancing knowledge, science, and insight. And so I'm proud of all the work that comes out of these institutes. I think, in a word, after 15 years, we have begun to prove our bona fides. There's a lot of success we can point to, a lot of good things in the pipeline, so to speak. And I think there are issues that the state is grappling with, the drought being one, reducing carbon being one. Wildfires are related to the drought, but still distinguishable, that they could be a severable subject. So I would hope that each of the institutes would look and see what it is they are doing already that could help the state cope with some of the challenges it's facing, as well as what their sister institutes are doing. Because I think now is a good time to go to the state and say, I know you're interested in X. We've been working on it for 10 years. Here's what we've developed so far. You know, if you can give us a little grant money or a little something to sustain us, we're already halfway down the path, or 2/3 down the path, and so we've already assembled good people. No reason to reinvent the wheel. These are your institutes. You finance them every year through the money that we get from the UC Office of the President. So use us and let us be a resource to assist the state in dealing with some of its major issues. I know the governor is very concerned about carbon reduction and is going to look for ways to enhance what's going to happen on the natural through more efficient buildings, which is something CITRIS works on, more efficient transportation opportunities through electric cars, hybrid sort of as a bridge to electric cars, and just general efficiency, whether it's from transmission lines or from the entire electrical infrastructure that will both reduce emissions, reduce disease, and make this a more livable place. So I guess in a nutshell, my challenge is, beyond the individual work you're doing, think about what your institute or what a combination of institutes can do to help the state solve some of its big problems. We're funded by the state. We were initially funded by the state. We're also the beneficiary of some private money. I set it up that way on purpose. I didn't want to be totally dependent on the public sector. But we've proved that we can innovate and we can solve problems. And so we are a resource that the state should take advantage of. My final point is, don't come up with a list of 30 things we can do. Come up with a list of 3 or 4 things we can do. And I think we'll get attention in the corridors of Sacramento, and I'll be happy to work with the directors, Costas, and the other directors to put in a good word for the ideas you come up with. But I think it'll be an additional source of funding for you, but more importantly, it will help the state solve some of the problems it's currently dealing with.
Good. So let me give you a follow-up question which is connected. We're honored today to have Tom Nesbitt with us, who's the director of the California Telehealth Network, which is now very widespread, going out to Eastern California. We have Josh Veers here, as I mentioned, who's the director of Merced. And we know, Merced is specially placed now to address these issues like water and sustainable infrastructures. And with Pat Manti from UC Santa Cruz, with sea level rise and concerns about coastal resilience. I'm hoping I can lead you up to a question that we can create these special institutes that have an impact on all Californians, right? Not just on the research community here, especially on the coast of California.
First I have to tell a story about UC Merced. So I did everything I could as governor to move that process along, and those of you who were aware of it at the time know we moved heaven and earth. There was like vernal pools was our final. You know what a vernal pool is? It's like
no. You better tell us what a vernal pool is. It sounds like something from Shakespeare.
It's like a mud hole. And when the sun comes out, it evaporates. But 85,000 environmental challenges to it. So the only way we were able to solve it, which caused me great distress, was we had to take 3 of the 18 public golf holes away from Merced to please all the people who were objecting what we were doing with these mud holes once they were dry. Happily, I think they got their 3 holes back at some point in the future. But and then it's a related story. So I'm a lieutenant governor, and we're voting on whether the Merced should be in Fresno or Merced. And the committee, the regions meet, in the whole, so you hear all the committee discussions. You just can't vote on them if you're not a member of that committee. So they vote like 5-4 or 6-5. It should go to Fresno. The next day in the LA Times, big story. Regent Collegian, who I knew was a very good man, owns a lot of property around Fresno, and even though he's abstained, he will benefit from this university going to Fresno. So, flash forward, I'm now governor. I'm actually out of office for about 9 months. When Merced is open, they were kind enough to invite me to the opening. They were very kind to me. There's one building built, the Collegian Library. So clearly he owned property in Merced as well, not just Fresno. So I just wanted to share that little insight with you. That's how policy is made. You make a decision, the LA Times says, no, don't do it, so you don't do it, and then you find out that you got the same problem in Merced. But what can you do? You can't start over. I hope, I'll give you a shorter answer to this question. I really hope that each institute, focuses on its mission like San Diego, Larry can tell you, they're doing great work on health, fantastic satellite imaging capabilities. And that should be their core mission. But there may be things they can do in addition to what they're currently doing, or there may be things that they're doing they're not highlighting now, but because the governor's interested in carbon reduction, he's interested in the drought, and interested in a few other things, he may see a connection that goes beyond the mission of Cal IT or the mission of CITRIS or the mission of CNSI, et cetera. So I don't want you to divert your attention from what you're focused on. Just say, are we working on anything that could be of value to the state to help them, give them information and give them resources to make a decision? And if the answer is yes, then either send it to your director or somehow email it to us so we're aware of it and we'll champion it. Because I think the state will have a better, more respect for these institutes once they see that you are solving some of the problems that they're, and you are, they're just not aware of it. So this I think will work well for both sides.
Good. So let me do two things at once now. The governor stressed the importance of entrepreneurship and had this very nice personal story about how on the East Coast they wait until their idea is fully baked until they share it. And I think the way in which you described how people interact in coffee bars all over Berkeley and Palo Alto is really
I have to tell you one of the stories. So I met, you'll pardon the expression, but in my youthful indiscretion, I went to Stanford. I apologize that for many years. Every day, Charter Day, is that it?
Yeah, that's right. That's
so they said, unfortunately, your hotel tonight, Mr. Davis, there's a mixer. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm there with my wife. It's not a mixer in the sense that my generation thought of it. Everyone is just sharing their apps on their iPad, asking for information how they can get a better app. So it's not it's an idea mixer. It's not find a date to go out with.
It could be both. It could be both.
Well, no, but it was predominantly, I was prepared to see the former, and it was predominantly the latter. That's why I'm...
Well, that's Stanford for you, right? Here is kind of different.
More loose.
We mix it up loosely.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. I've completely forgotten the question I was going to ask. That's my job as the panel leader here. But you're sitting next to the king of incubation, Patrick Scaglia. And like Ruzhina, actually, Kostas and I especially want to thank Patrick, because there were many times when we wanted to try and turn 3 institutes into 4 institutes. We had enormous backing from the leading companies in the Valley, especially Hewlett-Packard. And at that time, Patrick had a senior position at Hewlett-Packard. And honestly, he would drive regularly with us to Sacramento to make the connections with Governor Davis and his staff. And then we would drive back thinking, well, maybe we made a difference, maybe not. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, we had to go and do it again. And Patrick was always, always willing to drop his day job and come with, and Pat Menter, you did that a few times too, right? You drove all the way from Santa Cruz to do that. And there's something special about Patrick Scaglia, who feels, I think, that this place is, his blood, sweat, and tears, as well as people like Kostas and myself and Domenico, Melissa. Melissa's nodding that you drove with him some days, right? You were probably the chauffeur of the day. And those were very important days for us. And so first of all, I'm going to ask for a round of applause again for doing that. But then secondly, let's segue a little bit. At that time, you didn't just do that to be part of our what you call booster team. In your heart of hearts, you knew this was the right thing to do, right? And so explain a little bit what was going on inside your genes, in your DNA, when you were making those long drives with Melissa and our wonderful friend Richard Newton back there in 1998, 1999. What was going on inside you?
Maybe the best way to start with, maybe it's anecdotal, but I think it was somewhat of a trigger for me, why this had to happen. This notion of multidisciplinary institute, I mean, it's totally obvious today, really obvious. But at the time, it wasn't. I mean, today we know that most of innovation is in the intersection between different fields. But at the time, this was an opinion, not something that was commonly perceived as the right way to spend research money or the right way to do things, or certainly not the right way to do an institute, for that matter. So this resonated with me. It was sort of a crusade that was, if you want to call it this way, maybe that's a bad choice of word in this day and age, that I was attempting to drive through at HP also as a way to look at the world. And it turns out to be true. And I think that was, for me, really impressive that so many bright minds, and I mean, you know, all the people here are way brighter than I can be, ever. But it was amazing to see that this was actually the driving force for everyone. And it was a belief. And sometimes you have to believe in a vision of the future in order to do things. And so that's the memory that sticks with me about those days.
Okay, good. Those are nice memories. So Patrick, 4 years ago, decided to leave his post at Hewlett-Packard, and it was probably the same week that he made that decision that we happened to have lunch together, and you were still wondering what you were going to do with the rest of your life. You know, one of those important moments that we all have. And I thought, wow, I'm going to grab Patrick. You know? So a little bit, almost aggressively, I started talking with him about the dream that we had in this building to do something with the basement. That sounds like a bit of a, doesn't sound like a big dream, does it? But at that time, we had that whole lower floor, the first floor, except for Ruzhina's lab and one lab from mechanical engineering. We had nothing going on down there. And my own personal work in 3D printing and rapid prototyping was going on in Echeverry, and I thought, okay, this is probably a good thing to do to create this space down there. And Patrick and I just had this delightful time kicking the football backwards and forwards. But we knew there was always the Maker Faire that was already happening. We had hackathons all over the campus. We had to do something different. And so I'm leading him into a question now about what makes the CITRIS Foundry and the CITRIS Invention Lab special. And both at that time, we were seeing some different trends about how you should approach a VC in those Palo Alto meetings and the Berkeley meetings. And we focused on hardware, because hardware was beginning to bubble up in the newspapers as an important element of what you should do in terms of your next prototype. But more importantly, what society needed. We needed better devices to test diabetes on the fly. We needed better devices in hospitals, right, to do on-the-fly prescriptions and so forth. So this is a good point, Patrick, I think, to hand over to the shared vision that you and I had, especially you had, in 2011, when we wanted to start that whole enterprise downstairs, which will lead into our other three handsome young people to your left.
So it was 2012, actually.
2012, sorry. Okay.
And so maybe it's a somewhat related story from what I was mentioning before, which is we had this vision or this view that there was two elements to it. One was an observation, simply, that CITRIS actually had generated quite a fair number of companies, startup companies. Good companies, because when I actually did the count in 2012, I noticed one thing, which is very unusual in the startup world, which is most of these companies were still alive. And so that tells you something about the strength of the underlying idea. If you have something really strong, you'll find a way. It may not be the original way, but you'll find a way, and most of these did. And so the question I asked actually Paul, I say, well, how did that happen? And well, it happened. And there was the core of the idea about creating an incubator, which is, well, maybe if we were to actually put our mind to it in helping people who have these ideas and want to move them out into the marketplace, if we were to actually put energy behind them and guide them and help them as much as we could, maybe the success would be even higher than it is. And so that was one element. And the second element, as you mentioned it, Paul, was this view that while they were at the time, and still are today even more, a very large number of startup incubators in the Bay Area, very many. They all had some characteristic, very short incubation time, 3 months typically, 3 to 6 months. It was all geared around one aspect of technology, which was what was happening at the time. The mobile social was bubbling up. And so if you had a company in that, you wanted to start a company in that field, those were perfect places to go and get a lot of support and help you take off. But if you wanted to build systems, tangible things, where would you go? In fact, at the time, there was one option in San Francisco, an incubator that just started, 3 people starting it. And so, we discussed it and I proposed, well, maybe we take those 2 observations and let's create something that would be squarely focused on helping startup companies take off in the system space, largely speaking, the set of hardware, software, sensors, and guide them and support them and mentor them so that we maximize success rate. And that's how we started. And we put a simple objective, which is to say, we should bring these teams to a point where they have a prototype, a customer, and a plan that a Series A venture firm would be likely to fund. And so that actually has been our measure of success, is we bring these companies to a point where they get the funding. And it has been a tremendous ride.
That's right.
And I have to say, if I may, since I have a microphone.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
I would say, one thing that did surprise me in looking back is the success rate, which is, we have done 16, 17 companies to date for the incubators. 2 are no longer there. Everyone else is still operating, has been raising money. It's an amazing success rate as far as incubators go. And I have a lot of friends that spend a lot of time in the other incubators, including YC and elsewhere. And that is testimony to 2 things. This is a place that cultivates amazingly bright people, amazingly smart people. Sometimes it's frightening. And the second thing is, I think Berkeley and the UC system in general is focused on really solid engineering. That is a remarkable thing. So the ideas that come out of here have a solid underpinning. And the market view may be wrong, the choice of customer may be wrong, how to introduce it in the market may be wrong, but the underpinning is solid. And with that, you just have to pivot and pivot and pivot, and you'll find a way. And so I think that is also an interesting consequence of what comes out of this institute and the UC system at large. Okay.
So with that in mind, and we'll keep circulating around the panel as we move. This is a perfect moment, actually, for me to acknowledge the fact that we put a lot of the state money into building that invention lab with its 3D machines and its electronics there. And it also was connected, very importantly, to the Tech Museum, which we have outside here. And Governor, the Tech Museum, I think Costas and Julie and others, Camille, you'll back me up. Every single day, there's some group of Californians in there that have come by to do some of the meeting, and they drop in there, and they enjoy the Tech Museum. It's a front door to our activities here. It connects also to the Foundry and to the Invention Lab, because you can see that there's a tradition of building things here. And I really would like to give a little round of applause for a guy called Dan Chapman, who is the person that's kept that together for the last 15 years. So let's give him. I don't think he's here in the auditorium, but I'm sure he's out there manning the Tech Museum to make sure that our guests are doing a great job. The other people that have done a fabulous job as the interface between Patrick and myself, and of course Costas, Camille, and Julie now, is the 2 of them are Peter Miner, who is not here today, and Alec Chen. I'm honored to say both of them were my previous PhD students, and so I feel a very special, almost fatherly connection to the two of those guys. And Alec is here today to represent the students of the Foundry before we get into two of our special projects. And I think between Alec and Patrick, we'll do a little tag team here where I'll ask Alec, what do you say as the young man representing this Foundry is the secret sauce of both the Invention Lab and the Foundry? What is it that makes the secret sauce happen in your mind?
Yeah, from, being a student here, and sort of seeing the change and the activity going on around entrepreneurship and the maker movement, it really is the people, right? That community there, and the community within the Invention Lab, the community that we've created within the Foundry. These are sort of the intangible things. As we build out the lab, you've got the 3D printers, machines. Those are all just capital equipment that really any university can buy or any sort of space can buy. And the sort of availability of these tools and how these things are getting cheaper now makes it really simple for anyone to do this. But really, it's really the people that are around in there that are being very creative and just the amount of things that they're learning and sharing with each other has been, I think, that the secret sauce to what's made this great.
And we have Chris Myers in the audience today, and Mark Oldberg is probably downstairs working away right now. Chris, I'd like to thank you for all of your role in this. Next to him is one of the main technical leaders of the new Jacobs Institute. It's very nice to see you here today. Thank you for coming. And what we're finding is that there's such a buzz on campus for this kind of activity that we were delighted to find that Paul Jacobs of Qualcomm was able to fund that new Jacobs Institute as another extension of the kind of work that we feel that we started downstairs. But again, you should say, I think, Alec, that, and backed up by Patrick, we have fabulous connections with QB3's garage, right? And many of the other important innovation ecosystems around not only this campus, but broader into San Francisco. So can you give a little expansion of what we do with these other incubators, please? Yeah,
I think from the beginning, when the Foundry was created, we realized that we didn't have all the answers to everything. And, knowing that up front really helped guide how we formed the program and the networks we created. We've always operated as a network to try to partner with groups both around campus, with the other folks doing entrepreneurship over at CET, over at Skydeck, but even beyond that, with our sister institutes.
Oh, I'm forgetting, Davis has its own incubator now too, right? At the medical center. That's right, Tom, right? Yeah.
Yes, and we're continuing to try to reach out and connect with all these different groups because, again, it's really this sort of broad open network that's allowed us to strengthen what we're able to provide back to our students, our community, and our teams. In the case of QB3, that was looking at, they've become such a powerhouse in incubation within biotechnology and life sciences. We sort of started with this focus at this intersection of hardware and software and sort of more of the engineering side of things. And we saw that as very complementary. As there were all these technologies around, connected health and, again, more engineering-focused, biotech startups that weren't just sort of drug-type companies. And so by working with these different partners and trying to put together, whether this was in the form of challenges where we had mentors come in and work with our teams directly and be part of both programs, or even just really loose partnerships where we bring them in. And again, it's just finding more ways for our communities to interface with each other. Yeah. And really on that topic of mentorship, I mean, it's been incredible how we've been able to draw from the alumni base of both UC Berkeley, but just really, the UC.
Yeah. And on that regard, I see a couple of other people in the group that I hadn't honored before, but Steve DeMello is here today. Steve, put your hand up. He was very instrumental in making a lot of those contacts. And in the energy space, Therese Peffer, who's here today, has also helped with many of those. So Now, here's the time now, I think, thinking about Therese and her work in energy, connecting it now to Anna, who's with us here today, one of our really successful entrepreneurs, Anna Schneider. She is the co-founder and the CTO of What Time. And I think, first of all, you should explain what time is. Quite a tongue twister there. And then tell us, how important it was to incorporate a non-profit organization. That's the one part of your organization. And how do you see these non-profits contributing to this entrepreneurial ecosystem that we have around us? So over to you, Anna. It's great to have you here today. Thank you.
My pleasure. So What Time, as we said, is a tech nonprofit. So we're writing software that runs on different kinds of smart devices. So something like electric vehicles or smart thermostats or commercial HVAC. And what we do is we automate these smart devices to use energy at the times when it's coming from the cleanest power sources on the grid. So if you think about when you flip a light switch, is that going to turn on a coal plant or a windmill or natural gas? And that answer changes as often as every 5 minutes, and we get that data in real time from all over the US and all over the power grid. And part of the reason we're doing it as a nonprofit is because our long-term vision is to reduce carbon emissions and other kinds of pollutants on the power grid overall. So there's a really deep social and environmental mission there. And part of how we're hoping to achieve that is by not only releasing these software products ourselves and working with hardware companies to get this out in the world, but also by creating a certification and standards movement. So along the lines of an Energy Star for smart devices, so that people can really know that What Time enabled or What Time certified or whatever it ends up being is a trusted source of information about where your energy is coming from and what you can do to use cleaner energy.
That's fantastic.
And that's something that a for-profit isn't able to harness that kind of coalition among all the different stakeholders, from the hardware companies to the environmental NGOs to municipalities and state governments, to really build that coalition that will move this social mission forward in the way that we think will spread the idea fastest, even though it won't spread our profits fastest.
That's good. And I see you burning the midnight oil up there in the Foundry on the 4th floor all the time. Anytime you come in late in the evening and you're there. The What Time is there doing it. Yeah. And so that seems like an important part of the whole building, right? That you have this 4th floor software space as well as the 1st floor hardware building space. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. So we haven't made as much use as many of the other teams of the Foundry have of the resources on the 1st floor, since we play around with devices a little bit, but that's not our specialty. Our specialty is just making the software. So it has been really critical to us to have the free office space for a year, essentially, up on the 4th floor. And also connections to all the other grad students on the 4th floor, and the other researchers in Berkeley, the Berkeley Energy and Climate Institute. It's been such a vibrant and productive atmosphere for us to be housed in for the last year.
I paid her to say that, of course. Now, Nick has been very patient, waiting for me to give him some questions. He does have some fabulous gizmos that run around, and when my daughter, who's in the front row, came to the Invention Lab, she was wowed by the little cricket robots running around Dash Robotics. And now, Nick, Dash has raised millions of dollars.
Yeah, 1.7 million as of April of this year.
Are you enjoying that big burst into cash, and you burning it quickly? What's happening?
Both. Yeah. It's very exciting. We have 5 full-time employees, 3 or 4 contractors, and the amount of progress we make every month is staggering.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And the holiday market is on the horizon, or you probably went to the computer science, the computer game show, right, back in January. And you're ready to launch for the Christmas period.
Yeah, so one of the biggest shows we went to just recently, a couple weeks ago, was Maker Faire New York.
Okay.
And we got a tremendous response there, won a few Editor's Choice Awards, and so we're very excited for the upcoming holiday season.
Okay. Now, coming back to the things that...
You should describe what Dash Robotics does.
Oh, yeah, sorry. What am I thinking?
I did bring some, because they're a little hard to describe. But basically, they're these legged robots. This is one without a shell. And they're made out of a flat sheet, which is a material that we invented that was originally pioneered here at Berkeley, the research lab that we came out of. And they're basically a tool for kids to build a robot with their hands, learn to program it. Oh, my phone's behind the mic here. And then play with it. And so it's a great learning experience and something that both kids and parents can be excited about.
Are you going to run this one? I see the lights shining there.
Yeah, sure.
Ella, take a look at this. Stop looking at Angry Birds and watch this.
Yeah.
Whoa, it's coming at you.
So that's the basic idea. And then one of the key components is because of the way we manufacture it, it's incredibly low cost. There's no tooling. And so we can make it more accessible to people that have had access to robots in the past. So a LEGO Mindstorms kit, for example, might be $500. That's very difficult for parents. For schools, most schools don't have that. If they do, they have 6 kids per robot. So you have 1 student programming the robot, 1 student building the robot, and 4 students sitting around doing nothing, usually. This will be selling for $49. Classroom packs of 10 for $500 that also have all kinds of add-ons that help the teachers. And that can really change, I think, the talent pool in the state of California to have a lot more people who get excited about engineering and STEM and programming that wouldn't be able to before.
Governor, is that something that you feel is it's mandatory right now to try and get everybody in California really plugged into this Maker Faire movement and help our K through 12 activity?
You know, I tell young people, the great thing about America is you can go to college, not go to college in your late teens, go to college in your late 20s, 30s, 60, 80, whatever you want to do. But at different points in time, different industries seem to be of greater national significance. And clearly, if you're willing to take the hard courses, the STEM courses, you're going to be prepared to compete for very lucrative and challenging jobs. I mean, it used to be, if you went to Harvard Business School, you'd all go to Wall Street. Now, a little more than half of the Harvard Business School goes to Silicon Valley. Now, part of that is because some of the regulations in Wall Street, I'm a Democrat, I basically favor regulations, but government, like all of us, always goes farther than it should, and it kind of self-corrects over time. But anyway, so they can make as much money in Silicon Valley, and they can help change the world. Wall Street, you're just giving people money, and maybe they'll change the world, maybe they won't. So if young people realize that they're really good-paying jobs, many of them going begging. I mean, you can get easily $125,000, $150,000 starting job. All your meals are free, and you have choices. And Google, they'll give you 20% of your time in theory, and I think it's more true than not, to work on anything you want to work on, assuming that what you work on you're passionate about. And a good chunk, almost 50% of their venture capital money has been investing in ideas that came out of that 20% of time people spend on stuff they're passionate about. So there's just a whole lot of perks that come from getting a scientific, mathematic, engineering, computer science, code writing, any or all of the above background that will give you an exciting life and a comfortable life and part of shaping the future. I was a liberal arts major, history, political science, in the 60s when I graduated, 64. That didn't make a huge amount of difference, but now it makes a huge amount of difference. Right. Now, even if you don't want to go to college, there are, just monitoring the computers and the equipment here takes certain skills.
Sure, that's right.
Many private companies will pay $80,000, $90,000 a year if you will take their courses online, complete them, get certificates of completion, they'll interview you, and if they like you, they'll hire you. But people don't realize that. So, we have to do a better job at communicating to young people and frankly to counselors, high school and college, that there are both technical paths to a successful career and engineering, computer science, math, etc. paths to a successful career. But other interesting jobs just are not going to pay you as much. And you need to know that, before you become a senior in college.
So in fact, then, I mean, going back to a very technical aspect, the Dash robotics. I mean, what challenges, Nick, did you face in your transition from having a great idea in your colleague's lab or your professor's lab into a product? Because you showed that origami sheet, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That was the great idea.
Yes.
That was the great idea.
Yes.
But a product that would make these very, very attractive moving robots for someone Ella's age. I mean, that's a new. That was the new transition, right?
Yeah, there's a huge difference between a research prototype and a fully fledged product. And actually, the Foundry is instrumental in moving us from point A to point B.
So the Foundry more than the Invention Lab in terms of, I mean, both.
Well, I would think that's part of it. So I think there's some things you need. You need people, you need space, and you need some funds.
Yeah.
And so the Foundry was helpful with all of that.
Okay.
So yeah, for people, they helped. I mean, Patrick helped us directly a lot, and also helped add people to our advisory board who were key. The space in the Invention Lab was, allowed us to develop this thing.
Yep.
And then the small amount of seed money was actually really instrumental, especially for grad students who often lack in that area, just to get the thing off the ground. And even though it's not an enormous venture capital amount of money, it's enough to do something and get to that next stage. And that was really important to us.
That's very good. So we're going to open it up for a few questions in a moment, but I'd like to do three things. I'd like to ask Anna and Nick this mean kind of question, like when they get mega rich, will you be able to give some money back to the university?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you said yes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sign up that man.
It's that form you just signed.
The amount is negotiable, but it's the heart that counts.
That's right.
That's right. Okay. Anna, you're willing to sign up too, are you? Okay.
Of course, with all the money that the nonprofit TTR will make.
Oh, okay.
We're happy to give back.
Okay, so before we go to questions, I just want to, I mean, it's so onerous, a great honor for us today to have Governor Gray here. It's a great pleasure to see him. I've got to the point now where I've met him so many times. He's somebody I have a great deal of warmth and admiration for. As you know, out there is a bronze a bronze plaque, a very large one that Domenico and I organized all those years ago. So that's going to be there forever. This is something that we'll always think about you when we walk by. And actually, when I came in the building today, Ella remembered that there was a ceremony many years ago, and we unveiled that plaque.
And
so
now we have a picture of Ella.
Now we have a picture of Ella. Yeah. But let me say, if you had to leave us with one kind of vision of the future, Governor, and the importance of California as a state for the country, what is it that burns in your heart that we're still going to do? What we're still going to do as an important mission?
I really think that California is the center of innovation in America and arguably in the world. But I don't want us to take that for granted. I do think it's really important for young people to know really early on that opportunities, as I previously discussed, exist for them, but they have to prepare themselves. There's a two-way street. You have to be educated, you have to take hard courses. Maybe you get an A- rather than an A, but at least you get a degree in something people want to hire you for. You can be an art historian and make $30,000 and have a wonderful life. But you can also work for Google and have a wonderful life. Or maybe add a zero to that 30 at some point in your life. So I don't think we do a good job as a society in letting people understand that there's some work that's more important to us at certain times and less important than others. I'm old enough to remember when Sputnik was circling over our heads, and the United States was kind of freaked out because you could see this spy satellite with the naked eye, and Eisenhower was then the president, and he said, if you want to be an engineer, this was like in '58, the government will pay for your education. Now, we may not be able to pay for your education today, but why can't we say a third, a half, pick any number you want, of the Pell Grants are going to be set aside for people who take courses that are in the national interest. And that national interest will change, because after Eisenhower summoned people to be engineers, about 15 years later, we didn't need any more engineers. I don't think that's going to change, because we are now inventing the future, and it's going to take lots and lots of talent, lots of new ideas, just constantly to keep, I think, this world moving forward. So I don't envision a day when there's not engineers. Well, let's say there's no need for any more engineers, but let's just say hypothetically there's today. Okay, fine. So maybe we need art historians for a while. And then the Pell Grants will give most of their money to art historians. But whatever at least the government could say, these are our priorities as best we can define them over the next 5 years, and we'll update them 5 years from now. And that will be a way of sending a signal. Not only will you get a good paying job, but you'd be doing something to help your country become a better country.
That's a great vision. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, applause. Before I do the final wrap-up, we have 5 minutes for 3 or 4 directed questions of anyone on our panel. Would anybody like to ask a question? Microphones are...
So we talk about the tremendous success coming from CITRIS Invention Lab and all the labs on campus here. UC Merced, the system's newest campus, has recently created 2 incubators, Volworks and Venture Lab. How can we cultivate the great inventions and minds of that area to really grow to a Silicon Farm comparable to that of Silicon Beach or Silicon Valley?
Okay. Patrick, do you want to have a shot at that? You're in that ecosystem more granular.
Yeah. I think, in a sense, Governor Davis said it very well a few minutes ago, which is the secret recipe is this openness, the willingness to collaborate, the willingness to share, the willingness for people who have been there before to turn and help those who are coming now. And I'm not sure why it exists here, but it's here. It's in the air. And with that comes the challenge, which is how do you seed it? Right? And so definitely, if I look at a place, the question you asked, we have asked ourselves that question many times, which is, so how can we replicate what we have done here? And it's not just an issue of replication. It's an issue of, does this ecosystem exist? Is there a critical mass of people who are willing to help? Is there a critical mass of people who have been founders of companies before who are willing to come and say where they stumbled and help the next generation not stumble exactly the same mistakes? And this is what creates the success. If there is infrastructure, it's very important. There needs to be money for infrastructure. You need to have an invention lab, something like that. And then you need to gather that set of people. So I would focus on trying to figure out how to create that community, that network, as Ali called it, and build it up. But that part is very challenging. That is the one reason, you said it earlier also, Governor Davis, which is the one reason so many places in the world try to emulate what happens here, and it doesn't work so well. Well, because there's this catch-22, which is it works because there's a network. Well, why is there a network? Well, because it works. And I don't know, and I say, I've been here 30 years, so I say, well, come back 30 years ago. The place was smaller, but it was starting. So, that's the best answer I can give you, is to try to build that network steadily and year after year, and it will work.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
And if I could just add to it,
yeah.
I mean, I had, when we wanted to build the Regents wanted to build a university in the Central Valley, as I spoke about earlier, because we knew it would attract research opportunities that don't exist there today. And I wanted to give young people a chance, other than agriculture, to pursue as a career. Agriculture is very important. It's one of our major exports. But I think the way you go about this is see if you can't target a community that's like 30, 40, 50 miles away from you, like an hour drive or something, and invite them over and show them what you have at UC Merced, and show them some of the scientists you have and some of the young people, researchers, postdocs, whatever, and get them excited about doing some research, or letting you do some research for them. And just sort of have a party or have an open house, get them over and do a show and tell and get them excited about what you're doing. And then once you get one or two of those things, contracts signed up, then target another community that you want. So it can happen because people will be excited when they see the young people and the energy and the possibility, but they need to know you exist and they need to see it and kick the tires. So that's would be my advice, to try and target an area that's like within an hour of the campus that might have a need that you think UC Merced could fill, give them a half-a-day program, serve them breakfast and lunch, and I think something will come out of it.
That's great. Great answer. We're honored to have our Vice Chancellor of Information Technology on board today. This is the whole campus-wide information technology activity. So over to you, Larry.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Governor, I'm a relative newcomer to the state, and I acknowledge and want to say how much I admire the vision that you and your administration have shown in investing in the environment that's fueled so much of this innovation. The current politics in this country doesn't seem to acknowledge and recognize the connection between investment in quality education and fueling the innovation economy. Any thoughts on what we might be able to do to counter that?
Tough question. Catch your breath for a second.
I think I would, I would give you a similar answer as I did to UC Merced. I would target Democrats and Republicans in the Congress that don't seem to be as friendly to research and innovation and the kind of information research complex, if you will, as they should be, and then look and see what districts they represent or what states they represent, and see if there isn't something that's happening here that can help their communities. Get them out here and show them how they can announce something in their district, which involves working with maybe Berkeley or Merced or Davis or Santa Cruz, and maybe partnering with the university in the state from which they come. So you instead of saying, why are you so mean to us, you say, hey, you have a problem. We think we can be part of the solution. You can be the hero. You can announce it. And all of a sudden, you converted a no vote into a yes vote.
We have one more question from the front here, and then we're going to wrap up.
So first of all, thank you for all the wonderful presentations and all of the wonderful efforts that all of you did, and I learned a lot of new things. One question is that we heard a lot today since the morning about the maker movement, and Patrick, you talked about the hardware pulling together the systems. I live in San Jose, and the view I get from the valley is that and it could be entirely wrong, I'll be happy to know if I'm wrong, is that the VC community is still mainly excited about software, about the social media kind of startups, that have succeeded, Facebook and so forth. Do you see a perceptible change, or at least a critical mass of investment capital moving towards hardware and system-oriented ideas?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And the short answer is yes, it's starting. It was one of the reasons I said before, it was great from Paul and when we had a discussion to have the foresight to think that that sort of bubble, the software thing, will run its course and there will be something else. And we are coming up into the something else. I mean, who would have thought 10 years ago we would create a car company in the Bay Area? I mean, this is like the most expensive place on earth. Why in hell would you do cars in the Bay Area? Yet we have Tesla, right? So think of it this way. Why is it coming and why is it changing? And I can see an investment. In fact, Nick here on my left is an example that he didn't have that much trouble raising the money, and we have had many others. I mean, the companies in incubator have raised, I think now we're at, $40 million or something. It's happening because what you need to do, two reasons. One is, this is our smart people. They can see when a bubble has run its course, and they all see it. So then the next question becomes, how do I manage risk? Their business is in managing risk. And so the reason why it has been so hard for sort of more tangible, non-software, pure software companies to raise money has been that they come and want a Series A before they have a customer, before they have a prototype, and they say, and by the way, I'll have these two things in 2 years. And contrast that with most software companies where 3 months I can show you a prototype and a customer. So I think we see our role, for instance, and I think incubators play a large role, and I wish there would be more of incubators like us in the Bay Area, and I'm advocating it a lot, and I'm seeing it changing. In fact, I've spent time with Sam at Y Combinator. He's totally in line with that, which is to say we have to de-risk system and hardware. We have to make it a similar risk level as software. Say it's a new software. Yes, you can get a prototype and a customer in less than a year. We have proven that many times over, and it can be proven many times over. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be energy generation, it could be a car, it could be robots, it could be anything. And once you reach that point, then investment comes in, because then it becomes the same process and the same assessment as with a software company. It has nothing to do with software versus hardware. It has to do with risk management.
So 2 final things. Let's do for Alex Chen, for Anna, Nick, and Patrick, and of course the governor, a round of applause for And now we're going to ask the governor to be in the middle of Costas and myself, rose between 2 thorns, and honor Chris Meyer again. This is a fantastic product. This could be anybody's product, because Chris has shown how if you pull this little thing, it opens up, and it honors you for a 15-year.
Oh, how cool.
This is fabulous. This is going to be a fabulous thing to place in your house, hopefully. And you see how, I think this could, Chris, I think this could be a product. It was made in the Invention Lab. Yeah, and Dan Chapman and Chris Meyer. Yep. It was made downstairs. Yeah, so let's do this. You should be between the 2 thorns, the rows here. So good. Thank you.
Thank you. That is so cool.
That's very clever.
Thank you, Costas.